Something that has a really big impact on your birth experience is your autonomic nervous system. So this is made up of two spheres. So we have the sympathetic sphere and the parasympathetic sphere. So the sympathetic sphere is not very sympathetic. This is where the fight or flight or freeze that happens during birth, that's where that lives. And the parasympathetic sphere, we can call that, the healing room. That's where we want to live most of our life. When we are in the parasympathetic sphere of this system, we're able to breathe deeply, normally. Blood is easily flowing to all of our organs. We feel pretty calm. We feel like there's not a lot of adrenaline, cortisol in our body. We feel pretty chill. When we're in that sympathetic sphere, we can think of that as the emergency room. We are feeling really triggered. We have super heightened awareness. Blood is only flowing or mainly flowing to the defense organs, and the uterus is not a defense organ. We usually have a lot of adrenaline moving through our body, and it's there for a reason. We have that sympathetic sphere to protect us in life or death situations. If you're driving on the freeway and somebody starts swerving into your lane, you want to go into that sympathetic sphere so you can react really quickly, so you can save your life. If you're being chased by a lion, you want to be in that sympathetic sphere. So again, only the defense organs are getting blood and oxygen, and you're able to react and save your life. The problem is, in our culture, a lot of us spend almost half our life in that sympathetic sphere, in the fight, flight, freeze, in that emergency room, because our minds have tricked us into thinking that being late for an appointment, getting in an argument with our spouse, that those are life or death situations. So we get really, really triggered by all sorts of situations in life. And unfortunately, birth for many women, even if they consciously believe, birth's pretty safe, a lot of us subconsciously have a lot of fear about birth. And so when we actually go into the birthing experience, a lot of us end up in that fight, flight, or freeze response. And for a lot of women, they end up in that freeze response. They're just petrified by fear of what's happening. And it's understandable. The sensations of labor, especially if you have never had a baby before, it can be really intense and it can feel a little scary. But there is one primary way to get yourself out of that emergency room, and that is to breathe. To take really long, deep, intentional breaths, because it is almost impossible to be in that fight, flight, or freeze response when you are taking deep, slow breaths. And it might take a couple breaths to start to shift you out of that emergency room, but it can be as simple as that. Just those long, slow breaths, drinking some water, just forcing yourself to keep breathing, to stay away from that really shallow breathing that can lead to hyperventilating, taking really, really slow, deep breaths. And this is so helpful because during birth, if we are in the emergency room and blood is not freely flowing to the uterus, that means that there's not a lot of oxygen getting to the uterus, which can lead to the need for certain interventions, to some distress for the baby and for the mom. When you're breathing deeply, when you get out of that emergency room and you're in that parasympathetic sphere, in that healing room, blood and oxygen freely goes to the uterus. It's easier for your cervix, for your perineum to relax and open, and you stay out of that really fearful space. So start to pay attention to when you're kicked into that emergency room. Start to notice when you're like, oh, my breathing is really shallow. I feel like there's a lot of adrenaline pumping through my body. I feel really tense and triggered. Just practice breathing yourself out of that, because doing that practice now when you're pregnant can help to train your mind and to convince your mind that something as simple as breathing actually can get you out of that fearful state, out of that fight, flight, or freeze response. So continually practice that, breathing yourself out, so you can be a pro at it by the time you move into the birthing experience. All right, let me know if you have any questions about this or anything else about pregnancy, childbirth, or early motherhood in the comments below.